Hello everyone, my name is Niels. I'm an environment artist here at Sierra Division. Today, I'll be showing you how to create a simple asset inside of Fusion 360, as well as giving you some tips and tricks how to work with it, some shortcuts, and how to set it up properly. This is just a simple demo. In future tutorials, we'll be going over more complex shapes, and I'll be giving you some more tips and tricks as well. So, let's get straight into it. Opening a blank project in Fusion 360, we are greeted by the grid. You can enable or disable the grid. You can change it from dark mode, light mode, etc. But the things you want to change are over here. This little icon here, you click it, click preferences, and the first thing we want to change is in general, design. I like to not capture my design history for the sake of performance. If you want to, you can. It makes it easier to go back and change some stuff during your modeling, but I don't really need it, so I just keep it disabled. If you want, you can just capture design history. The next thing is default units. I work in centimeters, but of course, you can always change it to millimeters, meters, inches, or feet, whatever you prefer. After that, click Apply and OK. One of the things of Fusion 360 is it's a lot of button clicking. It's not like Blender where you have some shortcuts, some pie menus, but we do have a design shortcut. By pressing S on your keyboard, you get this little menu. What this does is just basically a quick access menu. You can basically search any feature in Fusion 360, like pipe, and click this arrow over here, and it'll be inside of the menu. Of course, there's shortcuts as well. So, for example, if you want to modify, press or pull, fillet, chamfers, you can set it up perfectly with your keyboard. Just click the three dots here and change keyboard shortcut. And you can pick any shortcut you want and then press OK. These are the basic setup for Fusion 360. This is my setup. If you want to change some stuff, feel free. But let's get into the creation of the asset. So for any asset in general, you mainly want to use the correct dimensions and have a lot of references. For the sake of this tutorial, we're going to keep it short, so we'll just be using some arbitrary numbers, which I think are right. I've collected some references, of course. As I said, you want more. But for this simple asset, this will do. It's just a simple rectangle with a knob. So let's get straight into it. The first thing we want to do is create a sketch. You can either press line on your keyboard or go to create and press new sketch or create sketch. You press the plane you want. This is the front plane. I want my S facing the front, so I'll create my sketch here. If you press the S menu, that will bring up the shortcuts. You can just type in rectangle or rect, and it will give you the options to put it in. I already have my center point rectangle here, so let's use this one. The center point, I want it at 0, 0, 0. It will snap to it generally. So let's just click it, and it'll drag out a rectangle for us. You can type it in, 12 centimeters, for example. You can press tab, and it switches over to the next one. And let's just use 7. Looks about right. After that, you press Finish Sketch when you're done with it, and you'll have your sketch inside of your viewport. The sketch is also in the outliner over here, same as your bodies if you create one. So we want to extrude the shape out, and it's also kind of chamfered inwards. So let's do it. We can either press Create, Extrude, or you can set your keyboard shortcut to E. We press E, and it'll also already be selected. We just have to simply drag it out, and this will create just a simple rectangle, but we want it chamfered. So we can just drag the slider over here and see what looks right. Maybe a little bit smaller. There we go. And just press OK to create a new body. You can select Cut, Join, Intersect, but we just want a new body, so we press OK. There we go. We already have the main shape of our switch. One more thing I forgot to mention is I work in orthographic mode. For me, it's easier. How I do it is I press this little display icon over here, camera, orthographic. You can change it to perspective, anything you like. In this menu, you can also change the effects, the environment, so like light mode or dark mode, basically. So yeah, if you were to be in this mode without seeing the edges, you can just press Ctrl 5 on your keyboard and it'll show up with edges. You can also see it here, visual style, all the shortcuts over here. All right, if you look at the references, we can see this is kind of rounded over here and over here as well. So we can select the edges and do this. So what I did was selected the edges and pressed F on my keyboard. You can, of course, set it up here, fill it, press F, and you can drag it out. Now, if we look at the references again, you can see that it's kind of variable. It goes from thick to basically non-existent. We don't really want what we have right now, so let's just Ctrl Z it. The easiest method would be to press F again, so fill it, press one edge, and check out variable. That way you can create a variable fillet. You can change it up here. You can also add points if you wish. We don't really need it, so we're just going to leave it as is. Now you'll notice if you select multiple edges and you press F to fill it, you won't get the option for variable fillet. That's why I created one. Now you can slice your model. Shift S, split body. Shift S and slice it in half on the plane. Select your body and it'll cut it in half if your model is at 0, 0, 0. Delete this face. You can do the same for the bottom. Delete it. You don't need it. And you can do your design shortcut menu, press mirror, and then do it like this. Select your bodies. There you go. And join it together. Do the same. And join it together. Now you have the variable fillet as we see here. To create a more rounded edge over here, we press one edge and it'll automatically chain your selection. You can drag it out. Press OK. This is how it looks like. With the main shape ready, we can start looking at some references and see what we're going to do next. We can see there's a simple knob, some extrusion. So let's create the knob or the switch. What we want to do is create a sketch on this face right here. The nice thing about Fusion is when you create a sketch, you can press any face you want as long as it's not super curved like the fillets over here. We want to create it up here and we press it again. Bring up the shortcut menu and press our center point rectangle. Press the center, it will snap to it, and just see what looks right. Of course, use your references, use your measurements, but I'm just going to be using this. This looks good. Press finish sketch, and let's extrude this again. Your sketch will stay on the viewport until you do an action with it. So I pressed E on my keyboard to extrude, or you can go to here, create, extrude, and let's extrude it inward. You can go all the way back, which will cut your mesh, cut a hole in it, but we don't want that. We want it a little bit offset like this. You can press cut, because obviously you want a hole in there, press OK. Now, let's say you're not really happy with the depth of this hole. What you can do is go to phase mode right here, press the face, press Q for press and pull. You can drag it closer, you can drag it out, or you can drag it all the way outside of your mesh, which in the end will perform a Boolean operation and cut your mesh, cut a hole in it. I'm happy with it. I was just showing you, so I'm going to press cancel. The same thing can be done if you want it to create just a little bit smaller. You can press Q, select all your faces, drag it in or out. Want it a bit shorter or less wide, press Q, drag it in or out. The next thing we want to do, if we look at the references, is create this little extrusion here. For that, we're going to select the face, press E. You can drag it all the way out, or if you want it to snap to a plane, you can just click that plane when you extruded it, and it'll say snap to, press it. You'll see when you do that, nothing's here. Why? Because the operation is a join operation. You want it to create a new body. So we press create new body and press OK. Now it's a little hard to see, like this. So if you want to separate your object or isolate it, you go to your object mode, select your object, right click, and go to isolate. This will separate the object and make all other objects invisible, as you can see here in the outliner. This makes it easier to work with separate meshes once you have a really big project. So we want to have it a little extrusion right here, so a little hole. We could create a new sketch, create a new rectangle, and drag it out. But there's also a feature in Fusion called shell. It's right here, and if it's not, it will be here, shell. You can set a shortcut as well. Click it, and it'll ask you for a face or body. We want it to be on this face right here. Click it, drag the arrow out, and it'll shell your model. If you're happy with it, you can press OK. Right now, when you unisolate it, it'll be not that visible. So we want to go back and maybe round some edges out. Of course, this is a high poly model, so if you want it to be a low poly, you obviously would not do this. We're going to fillet some edges to make it pop out a little more. And if we're happy with it, we can rotate it, see what's good, press OK. The references also have a little chamfer here. We can do that by just pressing one edge. It'll change the selection, and you can just press it. Well, let's go. Chamfer is, of course, modify chamfer and set up your shortcuts. Once you're happy with that, you can take a look at your model, see if it looks good. You can, however, also change the edges here if you want it to be smooth. But let's just go over to the knob or the switch real quick. So it's a little extruded part, a little rounded with a knob. We're going to be using the shape of this. I'm going to isolate it, go to phase mode, extrude it out, and just see where you want it. I'm going to drag it here. If I'm not happy with it, I can always press and pull it out. Create a new body, else it will join together. Press OK, and there we go. If we look at the references, it's kind of rounded here. So your first instinct would be to fillet your model, but it'll give a result like this. It's not really what we want. So we can isolate that part. We don't really have to. Anyways, you can delete your edges. And now you could say, I can just fillet it now, right? What you'll have is rounded, but it's not really the look we want. The little trick is to chamfer the edges, so Shift-C. Just a small chamfer, like so. Fillet the inner edges all the way out. Whoops. All the way out. That way you have a nice little curve compared to just filleting these edges. There we go. Next up is the little extrusion part here. The way we can do this is go to the right view mode or press create sketch and select this plane right here. You can create a line by pressing L or going here and clicking this icon here. And we can see in the references, it goes a little bit sideways. So let's try to get that in. We can snap to any point, any edge. Let's try to create a little sideways. Make sure it's the right angle, like so. And close the sketch. You don't have to close your sketch fully. Like you don't have to connect these two dots when it turns blue. That means this edge here is already part of the sketch basically. So what's left is finish your sketch, press E to extrude, and then as we learned, snap to the face right here. You want it to join together, press OK. Now, it's kind of filleted up top here, but it also has a little curve here. So what we're going to do again, Shift C, chamfer through this, and fillet the inner edges again to create a nice curve. Create the little smooth lines here. We can fillet these outside ones, but you'll see it'll do some funky stuff right here. We don't really want this part. So the nice thing about Fusion, you can press this edge or face, press delete, and it'll smooth it out nicely. That way we can fillet your edges nicer, but we can see here, it goes a little sideways more. So let's grab this edge, press M on your keyboard or this icon here, and we can move it. Now, the pivot point isn't correct, so we can set the pivot here, press this icon, go over here, and it'll snap to any point, midpoint, edge, whatever. Click it. Make sure you press the little check mark here, and then you can rotate the little thing. Sometimes it'll do funky stuff when you have some fillets. Just make it look good. There you go. We can make it a little bit thinner. Set your pivot again. Drag it out like so. Awesome. That's already looking good. Now we can start to fillet these edges. Make it just a little rounded, like so. There we go. This one right here. After that, you can refine every detail you need. Of course, when you have a low poly, you would not really do this. It can be baked down easily. Cool. We have our basic knob. Very simple, very quick. The next step would be to create the little rivets, the little nails, screws. Let's go. To create a little screws, you can either create a circle or a cylinder. I have it set to Shift R. We can try it like this. Select your face again. And if you want it to be exactly in the middle, it will usually snap to it. And if it didn't, you can make sure you have your triangle and drag it down. It'll keep the same axis from the middle point right here. Let's create a small one, like so. And then you basically get an extruded cylinder. We want it to be extruded inward. We want it to cut our model. So we drag it in our model to cut it. You get a little example. Press OK if you're happy with it. From that cut, we can make our first screw. We select this face and extrude it out. Don't press join. We wanted a new body. Press it. Select the outer edge. Press F to fill it. And if we look at the references, we can see it has a little rectangular inset. So let's sketch on this profile. Create a new sketch. Press that face. Create another midpoint rectangle. You can either isolate your model, but if you would forget, like in this case, you can open objects to cut and you can deselect any object. In this case, we don't want it to cut our main body, so we deselect it and press OK. Not really happy with the width. Select the two faces and drag it inward. There we go. We have our first screw. We could create it again, but we could also slice the model in half, delete this part, select both objects, both screw and main body, go to shortcuts, mirror, and mirror it. Press join so it joins together. So this is what we have now. For aesthetic purposes, we can select one body, press M or an icon here, set the axis pivot to the middle, press the check mark, and just rotate it. To make it more aesthetically pleasing, we can press the A for appearance. This will bring up the appearance menu. You can just basically choose any material you want. So we can go to plastic, give it a white material, and drag it onto our bodies. And there we go. We have a very simple light switch in Fusion 360. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out the next tutorials where we'll be going over some more complex shapes, and I'll be giving you more tips and tricks and future-proof your asset, so making it game ready, thinking about baking, etc. Peace out, guys.